The Atlanta Hawks love to put their guys in trade rumors. Am I wrong? Now, we talked about the growing sense that the Hawks swingman Bogdan Bogdanovic could be traded at the deadline. My colleague at Hoops Hype, Michael Scotto, writes, the Suns and Heat and other teams have expressed interest in Bogdan Bogdanovic. And as previously reported by Hoops Hype 2 days ago, the Suns are also exploring pairing one of their newly acquired first-round picks from Utah with Jusuf Nurkic to acquire starter caliber or high-level rotational player. Bogdan Bogdanovic fits that criteria, and they have been in trade talks involving Nurkic and a future first in a larger potential multi-team construct, league sources told Hoops Hype. Now, I think if you look at the other veterans for the Hawks that are drawing interest on the trade market, not named Bogdan Bogdanovic, Hawks center Clint Capela, expiring contract, $22 million, has drawn trade interests from multiple teams, league sources told, as he recently was moved to the bench. Okongwu's killing it. One caveat, however, is that teams who are reaching out to acquire Clint Capela are currently only proposing offers with player under contract beyond the season, aka long-term money, ladies and gentlemen. And furthermore, Sixth Man of the Year candidate DeAndre Hunter has drawn interest amid the best season of his career. I think Quinn Snyder likes him, and he's on a relatively cheap deal. However, I would not be surprised that if a team came and tried hard enough to pry him, that they could be able to do something along those lines and get a guy like DeAndre Hunter off this roster, as DeAndre Hunter has clearly shown the ability to be the Swiss Army knife that we want him, but he also has shown that if you give him the ball, it's almost like him being moved to the bench gave him the green light and the confidence to do what he does. And for someone who's been in the league now 6 seasons, yeah, this is year 6, and he has shown the flashes. The three-point shot for his career, he's about a 37% three-point shooter. It's there. He's shooting 46% from the field. I think the last few seasons he's been efficient in terms of his shooting and scoring. But this year, he's really playmaking like we knew he could. I know his stats aren't telling the full picture there, but he's really getting the ball up court quickly. He's getting the balls into the hands of his guards and his bigs. The other thing is I think him having the shot creation button where like they're putting the ball in his hands and they're saying like, go out and do this. Go out and finish the play for us. I think that's the thing that's stuck out with Hunter this year, as his 38% is reminiscent to last year. Same thing with his 46% from the field. But I think it's the way that they're using a guy who clearly had high basketball IQ, had the ability to pass, dribble, and shoot, and to take advantage of that. You have a 7'2" wingspan on a guy who's 6'7", 225 pounds. He's the Swiss Army knife with the prototypical size at the position that does a bit of everything well. He can run the pick and roll. He can roll the pick and roll. He can shoot from the outside, attack transition, starts the fast break, and it feels like he's in the upper echelon in those play types statistically. And he's already been a fantastic defender who can guard every single position on this team, even though Dyson Daniels has surpassed him. But in the offensive game, he's become consistent, which now matches the well-rounded abilities we knew that he had. So that's one I like. But Clint Capela, I could see a team that needs center help and has cap space to rent out could be interested. Or if a team, they like the Nets are just salary dumping. I really think the Pistons make the most sense. No offense to Isaiah Stewart or Jalen Duren. You give up Tim Hardaway and Simone Fontecchio, who aren't in your long-term plans. You get Clint Capela on a rental to help you out in the playoff run. So when push comes to shove and the pressure gets hot, if Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren crumble, you've had Clint Capela to be that reliable option for Cade Cunningham to grab rebounds, especially on the offensive side, and to be just an interior presence. And if you guys really like him, you'll be a free agent this offseason. You guys can talk contract. But I think that's the best way for me, how I look at it, because why wouldn't you do that? Yeah, so I would be curious to see what the going rate for DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capela are going to go. I think Hunter's the most valuable, while then it's probably Capela because of the expiring. And then Bogdan, yeah, he's 32, but he just doesn't align with the core. I definitely curious to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that. I think it definitely is cool to see how it's all working out. Because to me, I think this is a team that has the ability to quickly get into scary playoff position.
Yo, what's going on, guys? And today I wanted to talk about a report that my colleague at hoopshype.com, if you guys want to read the full intel report from Michael Scotto, go hit the link in the description at hoopshype.com. And yes, so the report goes like this. Obviously, if you guys had been living under a rock, the Atlanta Hawks finally made the move that we had been waiting all year since the offseason. Onyeka Okongwu is finally the starting center for the Atlanta Hawks, a man that they drafted in the top 10 a few seasons ago and have already given an extension. Meanwhile, Clint Capela is in the final year of his contract, and they did not extend him, even though they do have till June 30th to extend him. The Atlanta Hawks, in 3 games before becoming a starter, Onyeka Okongwu was averaging 18 points on 60% from the field, 15.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists, and 1.7 blocks. The promotion to the starting lineup is a reward for how well Onyeka Okongwu has played recently and seemingly starting to fulfill the potential that they had envisioned once they drafted him. And the opportunity is going to see how this team looks with Okongwu as the starting center before the deadline, as we're a little over 2 weeks out. Okongwu is starting a 4-year, $62 million extension. The 24-year-old center is part of the core around Trae Young and 23-year-old rising most improved player of the year candidate, Jalen Johnson. And I think Okongwu, Johnson, Zachary Reshape, Trae Young all fit together, and Dyson Daniels, Trae Young, Zachary Reshape, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu. Do the Hawks already have their starting 5 lineup of the future for the next 5 years? By the way, Trae Young leads the NBA in assists, is only entering his prime at the age of 26, and he's statistically the best passer since Steve Nash, and he's averaged the most assists and totaled the most assists since entering the NBA, I believe 6 seasons ago. And Capela is an Iron Man. He's been available 313 of the 318 games since arriving to Atlanta via trade in February 2020 from Houston, and his last appearance off the bench was actually January 18th, 2023. With Capela now coming off the bench, it's a $22.2 million salary, almost 22.3, expiring, and he could be a guy that teams who need a center and have salary to trade could look to move. And obviously, people are going to go, the worst rebounding teams in the league this year: Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Los Angeles, Lakers, the Orlando Magic, ironically, the Indiana Pacers, the Phoenix Suns, and the New York Knicks. And the New Orleans Pelicans are in there. So is Portland. Now, one trade you could think of immediately is Portland's in there, and that's not because Portland's a contending team. Other teams are like OKC, Miami, Minnesota, Washington, Toronto, and just to put out there, so all the rebuilding teams, if they were to trade for Capela, let's say let's say they send Robert Williams, as I doubt the Hawks would be interested in Mr. DeAndre Hayden. But Robert Williams, people are going to be like, he's barely played this year and he's injury prone. Well, he's only making $12 million, so they would save $10 million, the Hawks, and then he'd be an easier contract to move in the offseason. Plus, they don't need him to start. He'd be their backup. So right there, that's why they would do it. And he'd be actually only needed for like 12 minutes a night just to be a rebounding rim protection. Now, another team, if Indiana really feels like they need some backup center help and they're fine moving like Obi Toppin, or the other contract could be Aaron Nesmith, but I wouldn't trade Aaron Nesmith. So I don't see the Pacers doing that. Phoenix, obviously, they would have loved to trade Jusuf Nurkic, but Jusuf Nurkic makes actually less money than Clint Capela, so contract-wise, that's actually going to be one that's not possible. While OKC, they don't have like a contract that would be one that they would want to trade. So I don't see OKC. Minnesota, unless they're like trading Julius Randle, and I doubt that the Hawks would care for Julius Randle. So you look at, if the Knicks were going to give you Mitchell Robinson and somebody else, if Mitchell Robinson's out for the season and doesn't come back, they announce, and they package Mitchell Robinson. But the thing is I believe they're over the apron now. So the Knicks are, like, it becomes a bit, because they don't have technically enough money to do it. And that's where you look around and you try to think, okay, what teams could be interested in trying to make a move for Clint Capela? And the other one is, if the Wizards were like, here, if you give us Clint Capela and some second round picks, we'll give you Jonas Valanciunas, who makes $13 million less. I could see those are like, it's really, I think the Hawks are only interested in a deal that gives them caps saving move, like salary gymnastics, while also giving them a guy who's just going to be a backup center who fits what they're doing here. And yeah, that's my whole thought process on that one, with how Landry Fields is building this team. So I think that's what they're trying to do, is they're looking for, like, okay, who could be someone? Like, are they going to look at the Raptors and see if maybe Kelly Olynyk, as I assume Jakob Poeltl is not available, and Kelly Olynyk could be someone that they're interested in, as he could be a backup center and also a guy who can play power forward. While there's also Mr. Bruce Brown, who's an expiring, and I think he's another one that you could really think, because then they don't get handicapped into something. While I can't envision a team, I don't think Dallas is going to trade, as now Derek Lively is hurt. So Daniel got, unless, like, I don't even know who they would trade salary wise to help out there. So I doubt that would happen. Sacramento and Detroit could be a sneaky one, that if the Hawks package I just think Detroit wants a first round pick for Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew, but Beef Stew makes $7 million less, like $15 million, and he'd be perfect for this team. So if they could package Capela and some draft capital as trade sweetener for Isaiah Stewart, that could be one, because Clint Capela could maybe be a mentor for Jalen Duren, like he did for Nick Okongwu, and then give him kind of like a bridge guy. And while they try, Jalen Duren, like, we're getting to the end. Another one, of course, is Zach Collins. Trade Clint Capela for Zach Collins and some second round picks. I believe Zach Collins has another year on his deal, but he's making $5 million less. So he is another guy who they could trade for and save money and get a backup center. Yeah, he's overpaid, but who cares at that point? And outside of those options, hypothetically, if they traded Clint Capela and some second round picks for Nikola Vucevic, they get a really good center scoring wise who could be their sixth man if they want to keep starting Okongwu, and he makes $2 million, almost $3 million less than Capela. So it actually help you save salary, and supposedly he's going for 2 second round picks. That's someone I think that they could be interested in. With the rest of the roster, I think it becomes a bit difficult. You could look at Charlotte if they're trying to move Josh Okogie isn't going to be what they're looking for. So for me, yeah, I think the trades that we listed are some of the more likely ones that I think would come together. As the rest of the teams that could be interested are kind of put in, like, not the greatest of positions to make moves. They really just don't have the financial flexibility that one would want, or a contract to trade. They could also try to salary dump him in Brooklyn. I don't know who you'd want. Would you call up and be like, oh, you can send me Bogdan Bogdanovic and Duran Sharp. We'll just see if Duran Sharp's cool and we'll get his restricted free agency rights and re-sign him. That's always a possibility. Outside of that, I think we've gone through all the possible teams. Golden State, if they were looking to do that, it would require them to package what? Gary Payton and Kyle Anderson, and I believe outside of that, Gary Payton, Kyle Anderson. Now, who would be another? Yeah, I think like they're still a little short, like they're $5 million short there, and that would require them to include Lindy Waters and DeSantis. So the Warriors wouldn't do it. Would Memphis? I think Memphis is cool and with who they want, unless they're really trying to get rid of Marcus Smart or the package of John Conchar and Luke Kennard. But with John Conchar and Luke Kennard, I don't know off the top of my head because I don't have the cap sheet in front of me, but I believe that only brings them to about $15 million, and they don't have enough room to wiggle to take on that $7 million. And if they're giving up anything more than John Conchar or Luke Kennard, it's not worth it. So that goes, yeah, where I think the realistic teams that we said that have the money to do it. Again, if Brooklyn, if the Hawks are just trying to salary dump him, I think after that, New York is a real dark horse if they can. This team's insanely good at salary gymnastics. So if Mitchell Robinson's out for the season and they call up the Hawks and they're like, here, Francis Achua and Mitchell Robinson and some draft capital for Clint Capela. Portland, like I said, for the Robert Williams. Washington for the Jonas Valanciunas. Toronto for Kelly Olynyk or Bruce Brown. Would Sacramento really be desperate to get rid of Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles, that they'd be like Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles for Clint Capela? I mean, if they're that's I guess the sleeper. We'll throw that as the sleeper. San Antonio for Zach Collins. Detroit for Beef Stew. I don't see Utah having anybody unless like Jordan Clarkson or Colin Sexton is the guy they're going after. But like that just like really isn't filling like a hole that the Hawks need. And then, yeah, I guess Chicago for Nikola Vucevic, the Charlotte Hornets for a package, I guess, of like Cody Martin and Vasilija Micic. And nope, I don't see it. Maybe the Rockets do the trade of Steven Adams and Jock Landale because Steven Adams seems to have his knee shot. I don't know. Let me hear your thoughts.
With the NBA being a perpetual news cycle, I think the interesting story is Mr. Bogdan Bogdanovic and Jusuf Nurkic. Was a video we made yesterday. Supposedly they've had talks about Nurkic, and you would assume that after that report came out from Gerald Bourget, I believe it to be exact, Mark Stein then said that the Suns did have interest in Bogdan Bogdanovic, their team that would benefit from any more three-point shooting they could get. Bogdan is a guy who can play backup point guard, can be a starting shooting guard or a wing. He can play 1 through 3. He's not the defender he used to be, but he's not a turnstile. He's a secondary playmaker who has 2 more years left on his deal, but the 3rd year is a team option. So next year he basically becomes an expiring contract. And I'm under the impression personally, the way that I view this going down is if Gershon Yabusele is being shopped and Bogdan Bogdanovic is being shopped, there's so much news going around, but what are we taking away from these 2 separate trades? People want to save money. Nurkic makes a little bit more than Bogdan. So the Suns, obviously being a second apron team, have to trade for less money. Boom, they save money. Clint Capela makes more money than Nurkic. So in my mind, this is definitely going to be a 3-team trade. Clint Capela going somewhere. and probably that third team sending out a contract to the Hawks and eating Capela's, while the Suns take on Bogdan Bogdanovic and they send Nurkic, and Nurkic ends up on the Hawks. And I think that makes sense because Nurkic will back up Onyeka, and then you trade him in the offseason as he becomes an expiring. Bogdan gives you more depth on the Suns, and whatever third team. I know we talked about it yesterday. We said the Pistons would give up Tim Hardaway and Simone Fontecchio and get a first round pick. They'd give up 3 or 4 second round picks because they get a first round pick and consolidate their old, a bunch of their second round picks, send 3 to like the Suns and 1 to the Hawks, something like that, where everybody just kind of wins. Because Bogdan Bogdanovic had a rough year. He's listed as not with the team allegedly, and it seems like he's just been in Quinn Snyder's doghouse. And he struggled from 3 this season, even though he has a track record of being a near 40% three-point shooter. But even though he's still shooting 37% on the field, which isn't great, 40% is usually what he is, close for 3. So it's not like I feel like he's in a slump. He just doesn't fit this team. His field goal percentage 37, 3-point 30, rebounds a game just under 3, 2 assists and a steal a night. And the Suns are 14th in points per game. Their field goal percentage is 11th with 47.5%, 12th best 3-point percentage with 37.7, and they are the 8th worst rebounding team and 13th best assist team. Now, I think their 3-point shooting, their rebounding, and ball movement would all benefit from bringing in Bogdan Bogdanovic. He's going to be a guy who's going to be able to come in and really keep the ball moving and be a connector, a play facilitator, and a guy who can kickstart fast breaks. So the other team is the Miami Heat, which I love to hear that Miami is interested in Bogdan Bogdanovic. And I would not be surprised if this news is because, what if the third team is Miami instead of Detroit? And Miami's a team that is the 9th worst points per game scoring offense with just under 111 points per game. 11th worst field goal percentage at 45.7%. 16th best or 16th worst 3-point percentage, 36.7. 14th worst rebounding team and 13th worst passing team. I think the Heat would love the additional shooting and playmaking, especially off the bench. I think Bogdan Bogdanovic would give them a scoring punch, a playmaker, and spacing, as a team like Miami is really trying to make a playoff push as we get closer to the playoffs. And he's somebody that I think could be a contributor. Plus, in the past, Miami with Goran Dragic has had success with ball handlers of his style. So to me, it just makes a lot of sense if you are the Miami Heat or even the Suns to go out and to make trades, to do deals that are going to bring you somebody, for example, a Bogdan Bogdanovic, that he has multiple years left on his deal, but in my mind, I feel like you're going to be able to set yourself up pretty nicely with a player who could be moved again if necessary. And I think this team is doing a good job of slow rolling the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes, because I think they have realized they rather evaluate everything instead of just going crazy and making a deal that isn't going to benefit them in the long run. Because I personally believe there is no risk of losing him to free agency. And you're like, why? No one's going to pay him $52 million. He's going to pick up that option, and you're going to have to go through this to trade him again in the offseason. So if that's the case, I mean, I think they're perfectly fine just running this back to the offseason if necessary. And that's where I want to hear your guys' thoughts. If you guys are a fan of the Heat, what would you do? And I do think the Suns might have an easier time getting him, but it's definitely a thought to think about.
Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we're going to be talking about a report that the Atlanta Hawks have had discussions with the Phoenix Suns regarding Yusuf Nurkic, and that it was also put out that the Hawks have made Bogdan Bogdanovic available. And Nurkic is obviously basically getting a bunch of DNPs. He's not even playing. He's expected to be moved, but they're not in a rush because they actually believe they could get better value for him in the offseason because he becomes an expiring then. However, Bogdan Bogdanovic could be arguably one of the better players they could get for Jusuf Nurkic currently, which would give him a player who can play 1 through 3, be a secondary playmaker, a shooter, and he's actually a guy who can kickstart transitions and isn't a bad defender. Now, he has struggled with injuries, specifically with his knee over the years, and then this year he's only played 24 games. He's averaging 10 points on 37% from 3 rebounds and 2 assists. But with the Hawks, during those years, he's actually been about a 15-point per game scorer, 4 rebounds and 3 assists a night, near 40% from 3. Like, actually, like a really useful player when healthy. But as I said, he's a guy that this year been a little bit rough. And he had signed a 4-year, $68 million deal with the Hawks a few years ago. And at this point, he has, after this season, 1 year under his control. And then in 26 to 27, it becomes a team option. So it basically becomes an expiring deal after this season, because any normal team would probably more than likely decline. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts before we continue today's video. Do you guys like the idea of it'd probably be Jusuf Nurkic and a pick for Bogdan Bogdanovic? And I think it's actually a decent deal, because for what the Hawks, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks tried to find a Clint Capela suitor and turn this into a 3-team trade where they send Bogdan to the Suns. Suns send maybe Jusuf Nurkic to the Hawks with a pick going to the 3rd team that is trading Clint Capela, or trading for Clint Capela, and that said 3rd team gives up multiple 2nd-round picks and gives a couple to either the Hawks or Suns. Like, both teams walk away, the Suns and Hawks, with 2nd-round picks, as that way the Suns can keep the draft, like having draft assets and not just waste it would be a waste of 1st-round pick for Bogdan Bogdanovic. No offense to him. But by the way, I didn't say who was reporting this, but all this report is coming from the Bogdan news is from Mark Stein, and the news regarding Jusuf Nurkic is coming from the Arizona Republic. Dwayne Rankins is saying the Suns are looking to make a move and that they have had ongoing discussions. So you guys saw those at the beginning of the video. They are now linked in the description, or they should be. But yeah, I think if they're trading for Jusuf Nurkic, they definitely have to have a deal for Clint Capela lined up, because I can't imagine that they would just go ahead and trade for Jusuf Nurkic and have Clint and Jusuf Nurkic and Onyeka Okongwu, and they're still waiting for Larry Nance to be healthy. So yeah, I think the whole thing for the Hawks, they probably would rather churn Bogdan and Clint Capela into, obviously draft capital, and then allowing yourself to bring in Jusuf Nurkic gives you time in the summer to trade his contract, which would be is like $4 million cheaper than Clint Capela. So not only does the Atlanta Hawks gain some potentially a draft asset in this scenario, but they also get themselves a player that will be on an expiring deal in the summer, that, let's say, they pair with a 1st-round pick. They could get themselves the ability to just, put themselves in a position to be able to go ahead and use their draft capital this year, if they wanted, for example, and trade back or trade Jusuf Nurkic's contract for a player of equal, if not better value. So I think something along those lines could be something to watch for. And yeah, that's what makes the most sense to me, because I wouldn't have to assume they're not creating a logjam. And from what I understand with the current CBA, it's easier to actually complete a multi-team trade than it is to complete a just straight up two-team trade, because the more teams you have in terms of like salaries to play around with, it'll be easier to trade. So to me, I think something like that would make the most sense. Let me hear your thoughts. So, for example, a hypothetical trade would be the Detroit Pistons, who the Pistons says they don't want to be like a salary dump team, but they're trying to be a playoff team. And I think if they could get a big man like Clint Capela to be a rental, and they have way too many second round picks due to Troy Weaver having this weird fascination of them. So in this situation, we know that they want to trade Tim Hardaway Jr., and Simone Fontecchio is clearly not part of this team's rotation. Plus, Simone Fontecchio would fit Quinn Snyder's MO for what he wants. So if you put Tim Hardaway Jr., Simone Fontecchio, and a second round pick to the Hawks, and then you package 2 second round picks and you take on Clint Capela. So 2 second round picks go to the Suns, 1 goes to the Hawks. Pistons receive the least valuable of the first round picks the Suns have to walk away. So the Pistons walk away with the first round pick, the Suns walk away with 2 second round picks, and the Hawks walk away with 1 second round pick. The Hawks walk away with Yusuf Nurkic, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Simone Fontecchio. And Simone and Yusuf Nurkic become expiring contracts next year. The Suns receive 2 second round picks and Bogdan Bogdanovic for giving up Yusuf Nurkic and a first. The Hawks give up Bogdan Bogdanovic and Clint Capela, and they walk away with a second round pick. Simone Fontecchio and Yusuf Nurkic, who both have 1 year remaining on their deals. Simone makes 7.6. Yusuf is making like 19. And then Tim Hardaway would be an expiring, which also helps his team still remain a bit competitive. And the Pistons get front court help with Clint Capela, and they get a first round pick, and they get to get rid of some of the excessive amount of second round picks that they have. That deal actually works under the salary cap. So I really want to hear your guys' thoughts. Would that be something that you guys would do or not? I think it's interesting. So yeah, I think it doesn't have to be that deal, but those are teams that I feel like would all be interested in making something along those lines work, as they all gain cap flexibility, as everybody, even if the players do have a second year on their deals, they become expiring. So it works out. So I want to hear your thoughts.